Dub Nation, I have to tell you about something that happened on First Take this morning because it directly involves the Golden State Warriors, and it was the kind of accidental revelation on live television that sends the entire basketball internet into a frenzy. A well-connected ESPN analyst was on the show, casually dropped a piece of insider information as if it were already public knowledge, and then spent the next several minutes trying to pretend he hadn't just let the cat out of the bag, while Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharpe refused to let him off the hook. It was incredible to watch, and if what he said is true, the Warriors are about to make a move that could extend the championship window around Stephen Curry in a major way. The guest today was Tim Legler. Now, for those of you who might not be as familiar with Legler, he's a former NBA player and one of ESPN's longest tenured basketball analysts. He's the kind of guy who doesn't just talk basketball on television, he studies it, he breaks down film, he understands the game at a level that goes beyond most analysts. And importantly for this story, he has relationships with coaches, front office people, and agents across the league. He's been covering the NBA for ESPN for years, and in that time, he's built a network of sources that makes his analysis informed by more than just what's on the box score. When Tim Legler says something about what's happening behind the scenes in the NBA, it carries weight. Hey, what's up everyone? Real quick before we get into everything, that like button is literally what determines if this reaches hundreds or thousands of fans. Takes 1 second, but makes a huge impact on the channel's growth. Just smash that like button right now. It's the easiest thing you can do, but honestly, the biggest way to support this content. Every single like pushes this further, so hit it now. Legler was on the show to discuss the upcoming playoffs and the offseason outlook for several teams. The conversation was sharp and engaging, touching on the Eastern Conference favorites, the Western Conference dark horses, and which teams are best positioned to make moves this summer. And then Stephen A. steered the discussion toward the Golden State Warriors. Stephen A. asked Legler for his assessment of what the Warriors need to do to maximize the remaining years of Stephen Curry's career. He framed the question around the urgency of the situation, noting that Curry is still playing at a high level, but that the supporting cast hasn't been strong enough to compete for championships. He specifically asked about the offensive side, pointing out that the Warriors need another scorer who can take pressure off of Curry and give the offense a different dimension when defenses focus on shutting down the greatest shooter in NBA history. Legler was in his element. He started by breaking down the Warriors' offensive structure, talking about how their motion offense is still one of the best systems in the league, but that it needs a secondary scorer who can operate within that system. He talked about the need for a player who can shoot, who can space the floor, who can play off of Curry's gravity and exploit the openings that Curry's presence creates. And then, midway through this analysis, Legler said something that changed the entire trajectory of the show. He said, and from what I'm hearing, that's already being taken care of with Michael Porter Jr. I watched the studio react in real time. Stephen A.'s head snapped toward Legler so fast it was almost comical. Shannon, who had been sitting with his arms crossed listening to the analysis, unfolded his arms and leaned forward with his mouth slightly open. And Molly immediately jumped in and said, "Wait, what are you hearing?" Legler's face fell. Not dramatically, not obviously, but there was this subtle shift in his expression, this flicker of, oh no, that crossed his features as he realized what he had just done on live national television. He tried to course correct immediately. "Oh, I mean, that's more speculation on my part," he said, his tone shifting from confident analyst to cautious damage controller. "I'm just saying, you know, a guy like MPJ would fit what the Warriors need. That's all I meant." But Stephen A. Smith doesn't let things go, especially not when he smells a genuine piece of insider information that was accidentally revealed on his show. He turned fully toward Legler, pointed at him, and said, "Tim, come on, you said from what I'm hearing. Those words have meaning. You've been covering this league long enough to know the difference between speculation and information." "Which one is this?" Legler tried to deflect. He talked about how it's draft season and everyone hears things and most of it doesn't pan out. But Shannon cut in and said, "Tim, that's not what you said. You didn't say you heard something that might not pan out. You said it's already being taken care of. That implies something is happening. Are the Warriors and the Nets in talks about Michael Porter Jr.?" The pressure was relentless. And after about a minute of trying to dodge and weave, Legler landed on a response that, while hedged, essentially confirmed the substance of his original slip. He said, "Look, I'm going to say this carefully. There has been dialogue between certain parties about the possibility of Michael Porter Jr. ending up with the Golden State Warriors. That's based on conversations I've had. I'm not going to say more than that." And then he pressed his lips together tightly, like he was physically preventing himself from saying another word. But Dub Nation, that was more than enough, because what Tim Legler just told the world is that there are real, active conversations happening about Michael Porter Jr. potentially joining the Golden State Warriors. Not wishful thinking, not fan speculation, real dialogue between parties who have the authority to make these kinds of decisions. And here's the thing. This isn't even the first time we've heard rumblings about the Warriors and the Nets discussing deals. There have been prior signals of interest between these two organizations. The infrastructure for these conversations already exists, so when someone as connected and credible as Tim Legler confirms that dialogue is happening, it adds another layer of credibility to a scenario that was already more plausible than most people realized. Now let me get into why Michael Porter Jr. to the Warriors is one of the most exciting potential moves in the entire NBA this offseason. Start with the fit alongside Stephen Curry. And I mean, come on, just think about it for 5 seconds. Stephen Curry, the greatest shooter in NBA history, sharing the floor with Michael Porter Jr., one of the most prolific three-point shooters in the league right now. The spacing that creates is absolutely absurd. You simply cannot guard both of those players simultaneously. If you double Curry, MPJ is wide open for a three that he shoots at an elite rate. If you shade your defense toward MPJ, Curry has even more space to operate, which is already a death sentence for opposing defenses. The two of them on the floor together would create a shooting gravity that is unlike anything we've seen since the Curry-Klay Thompson pairing during the Dynasty years. And speaking of that pairing, MPJ could fill a similar role to what Klay provided during those championship runs, but with different strengths. Klay was a catch-and-shoot assassin who could also defend at a high level. MPJ is a catch-and-shoot assassin who can also score off the dribble, attack closeouts, and create his own shot in ways that Klay couldn't as consistently. At 6'10", he's also significantly taller than Klay, which means he can shoot over defenders, rebound at a higher rate, and present matchup problems that the Dynasty-era Warriors didn't create at the wing position. Think about the Warriors' motion offense with MPJ in the mix, the constant screening, cutting, and ball movement that has defined Golden State's system for over a decade. Now add a 6'10" wing who shoots over 40% from three, who can pop to the wing off a screen and catch and fire, who can sit in the corner and space the floor while Curry runs pick and rolls, who can curl off-ball screens and catch the ball in his shooting pocket and release before the defender can close out. The offensive possibilities are staggering. Defensive coordinators would need a whole new playbook to deal with the shooting that Curry and MPJ would generate within the Warriors system. And it's not just about threes. MPJ's mid-range game has improved significantly since arriving in Brooklyn. He can catch the ball in the high post, face up, and either shoot the mid-range jumper or put the ball on the floor and attack the basket. That gives the Warriors offense a dimension they've been missing. A wing scorer who can create offense in the mid-range and at the rim when the three-point shot isn't falling. In the playoffs, when defenses tighten up and three-pointers become harder to come by, having a player who can score from the mid-range with MPJ's efficiency is incredibly valuable. Molly brought up the defensive implications during the segment, which I think is worth addressing. MPJ has never been an elite defender. That's a fair criticism, but in the Warriors system, where defensive success has always been about team concepts rather than individual lockdown defenders, MPJ's defensive limitations can be managed. The Warriors use switching schemes, help rotations, and communication to cover for individual defensive weaknesses. And when you consider that MPJ would be playing alongside Draymond Green, who is still one of the smartest defensive players in the league, and Andrew Wiggins or whatever perimeter defenders the Warriors have, the defensive structure can accommodate MPJ's limitations without a significant drop-off. Let me also talk about the Nets side of this, because the deal has to make sense for both parties. Brooklyn is rebuilding. They acquired MPJ from Denver as part of a broader roster reorganization, and while he's been excellent as their primary scorer, a rebuilding team doesn't necessarily need a 24-point scorer who's in the last year of a $40 million contract. What the Nets need is draft capital and young players. They need assets that will help them build for the future. And the Warriors, who have picks and potentially some young players to offer, could provide exactly the package that Brooklyn is looking for. There's also the practical consideration that MPJ might not want to re-sign with a rebuilding team. If the Nets can't guarantee him a competitive environment, if they can't give him a realistic path to contending for championships, he might walk in free agency anyway. In that scenario, trading him now for something rather than losing him for nothing is the smart business decision. And if the Warriors are offering a competitive package, the Nets would have every reason to engage seriously in those discussions. Shannon made an observation during the segment that I thought was really insightful. He said that the Warriors have always been at their most dangerous when they pair elite shooting with elite basketball IQ. The dynasty was built on players who could shoot the lights out, but who also understood the game at a deep level. Curry, Clay, Draymond, Iguodala, they all had that combination of skill and intelligence. And Shannon said that MPJ, for all the questions about his defense, has that kind of shooting talent combined with a growing basketball intelligence that would allow him to thrive in the Warriors system. He said it's the kind of fit that might not look obvious on paper, but that would be devastating on the court, and I agree completely. When I think about the Warriors' offensive ceiling with Michael Porter Jr. on the roster, I see a team that can score with anyone in the league. I see a team that forces defenses into impossible choices every single possession. I see a team that has the shooting, the ball movement, the playmaking, and the overall offensive firepower to compete for a championship. And when you combine that offense with the defensive foundation that Draymond Green and the Warriors system provide, you're looking at a team that is right back in the conversation as one of the most dangerous teams in the NBA. Think about what this means for Steph Curry's legacy too. If the Warriors can surround him with another elite scorer, if they can give him a running mate who takes some of the scoring burden off his shoulders and allows him to play within the flow of the offense rather than having to carry it every night, Curry could potentially add another championship to his resume. And that would be the perfect way to honor one of the greatest players in NBA history by giving him the tools he needs to compete at the highest level for as long as his body allows. I keep going back to Legler's slip, the way he said it, the confidence in his voice before he realized what he'd done, the specificity of the name and the team, the fact that he used the phrase already being taken care of, which implies an active process rather than a hypothetical scenario. All of that tells me this is real. These conversations are happening. And based on how Legler reacted when pressed, and the carefully worded confirmation he eventually offered, I believe we're going to hear more about the Warriors and Michael Porter Jr. in the coming weeks. Dub Nation, this could be it. This could be the move that gives Steph Curry the partner he needs to make one more championship run, Michael Porter Jr. in a Warriors uniform, launching threes alongside the greatest shooter of all time, operating within the most beautiful offensive system in basketball, and adding the scoring firepower that Golden State has been desperately searching for. If this happens, Chase Center is going to be electric, the Bay Area is going to rally, and the rest of the NBA is going to have a serious problem on their hands. What do you think? Is MPJ the right move for the Warriors? Can he thrive alongside Curry in the Warriors system? What would you be willing to give up to get him? Let me know in the comments below, because this is the kind of conversation that matters. This is the kind of move that could define the next chapter of Warriors basketball. And I want to hear from every single one of you. That's going to do it for today. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because Dub Nation, this offseason is shaping up to be one for the ages. Until next time, take care of yourselves, your families, and each other. Let's go Dubs!